It's time for another installment of the Media Online's new video series, TMO.live, where we ask newsmakers the tough questions and explore the hot topics. I'm the site's multimedia journalist, Michael Bratt. This week we're going to explore radio. The recent RadioDays Africa conference thoroughly explored this broadcast sector. With me to discuss the outcomes of that conference, as well as general trends in radio, is Franz Krüger. He's Adjunct Professor of Journalism, and he's the Director of the Wits Radio Academy. Thanks for being here with me today.
Thanks for having me.
We'll start off with the conference. What were some of the key takeaways from it?
Gosh, Michael, it was just so much. It's become a very big conference. It's the 7th time we've had it. A very multi-layered conference with all sorts of kinds of activities, from master classes to top international speakers. We had Helen Bowden, the head of BBC Radio, as well as people from across the continent. I mean, there were many themes, I think, that stay with me. One of the big topics was the 90% decision on local music that came from the SABC, and we had a big debate on that. We didn't have the head of the COO of the SABC, even though he had intended to come. But we had a couple of other players, and of course there was a lot of support for that decision in many ways, but also some cautionary voices, some young people in the audience particularly saying, well, we do want to be connected to the rest of the world, and just because it's South African house, for instance, doesn't mean that it's actually culturally based here. I found very interesting the discussion around diasporic radio. On this continent we have a lot of radio stations that broadcast from outside countries into them, and to some extent to the communities of people who are refugees, who are in exile. And so we had some very interesting examples there from Zimbabwe, from Burundi, and in fact from Ghana, interestingly. There was a lot of discussion about multimedia. We had a presentation about the connected car. I mean, you'll know that internet-enabled cars are coming our way. And of course, that has huge implications for the ways in which people will be listening in the radio. I mean, I think fundamentally one of the takeaways would have been radio isn't going away. It's going to be with us for a good while, although the technical platforms are definitely shifting, and therefore audience patterns are shifting, and therefore radio, people who make radio, have to go where their audiences are and speak to them in the ways in which they want to listen and in the ways that they want to engage. So there was a lot going on, a lot of talk about innovation and related things.
That leads nicely to my next question. James Cridland, the radio futurologist, he wrote an article for the Media Online recently where he compared digital radio with traditional radio around the world. And he said in many countries, traditional radio still is king against digital radio. Do you think that that's the same for South Africa?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think, firstly, one needs to be clear on what you mean by digital radio, because there are different delivery methods within the digital space. There's audio streaming, where you're listening to a live broadcast, so to speak, over the internet. That exists in this country. I don't see huge growth simply because bandwidth is limited and the costs are high. There are podcasts where you put a piece of audio online, which you can listen to at your leisure. I think that there's potential there, although it's very small here still. I think there's potential because it becomes possible for people to use free Wi-Fi or other mechanisms to download something for listening at their leisure. And then there is, of course, DAB, the kind of over-the-air digital broadcasting, where we haven't seen much movement. At our conference, we did have some demonstrations of the technology involved. I think it will come, but it will take considerable time to really take root. So certainly in South Africa, I think traditional FM listening remains absolutely king in terms of audience size, in terms of audience reach, and will remain so. Having said that, I think we have to remain open to these other things. I think they will grow. It's hard to say exactly how fast. I think it will be fairly slow, but they will grow, and certainly if we want to be innovative and if we want to be where audiences are, we have to kind of judge the growth of those so that we can grow with, as those technologies grow, we need to be there.
There's exciting times for radio research and measurement in particular. You've got the baby rams, which is being compiled by the Broadcast Research Council. They're coming out today. And what are you expecting to get out of them, and what do you think of the research itself?
Well, it's going to be very interesting. Of course, as you know, the new audience measurement system replaces the old RAMs with a very significantly different set of methodologies. So the first thing that we need to expect is quite dramatically different numbers to the ones that the last of the previous generation of RAMs gave us. That'll be true across the board. It'll be true for national listening patterns. It'll be true for individual stations. I think what you can expect is a lot of stations squealing very loudly because either their numbers will be dramatically up or they will be dramatically down. So it will be important to recognize that you can only compare the two sets to a very, very limited extent because the new methodology is quite different. I think a much better sample and a different approach altogether. I mean, as it happened at the conference, we also had a presentation about, from the Broadcast Research Council, who gave us some headline findings. One of the really interesting things that came out for me, and I'm expecting to see that confirmed when the results today come out, is the significance of mobile listening. Traditionally radio stations think very hard about commuters because there is this assumption that people are listening in their cars. And of course people are listening in their cars. And that has implications for how you program and what you do, particularly in the mornings and the late afternoons. But actually, in fact, the biggest chunk of listening is in the home, by far. I can't remember the number offhand. And the second biggest is by mobile. Now that is people moving around, so that is to some extent people commuting. But clearly it far outstrips people listening in their cars. And I think that that's not sufficiently understood by programmers. I should just say, that doesn't mean streaming listening. It's listening via an FM receiver in your mobile. But it has all kinds of implications for what people are doing, what they're looking for as they're listening to radio.
So in conclusion from you, what is the future of radio, particularly in South Africa?
Well, I think it's going to be, it's a bright one. I mean, I think radio remains incredibly powerful. It speaks to people in a very intimate way. It speaks to millions of people who don't have other access to information. I think, as I say, that other technological platforms will be growing, and that's a great and exciting development. But I think that we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves and neglect the traditional platforms that continue to be incredibly powerful in reaching people. I mean, I would hope that that also means an increase in creativity. I do think that some of the formats that we see are fairly tired. I think we see a lot of kind of same old, whether it's the breakfast show joke or the traffic update in the late afternoon. I think we get a lot of economic indicators where you wonder actually who's really making any, getting any benefit from those. So I think a lot of formats are tired. And hopefully as time goes on with these new figures and with new technological platforms, we do find ways to become more creative in our use of what remains an incredibly powerful and intimate medium.
Thank you so much for those insights.
Thank you very much.
That was Franz Krüger. He is Adjunct Professor of Journalism and Director of the Wits Radio Academy.